Welcome back to another deep dive with us. You know how sometimes you get hooked on a news story and you just can't let it go?
Happens to the best of us.
Well, that's exactly what's happening with you in Project 2025. We received quite the stack of articles and podcasts from you. Really want to grasp how this whole conservative blueprint could impact, well, everyday life.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, isn't it? You've given us quite the diverse set of perspectives here, too. We've got a piece from the LA Times that delves into the politics surrounding this Project 2025.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a podcast from The Telegraph. They analyze the document through the lens of, get this, Trump's eating habits.
You know, I have to admit, when I saw Trump, Diet Coke, and policy analysis all in the same sentence, color me intrigued.
Right.
So, for those of our listeners who haven't been glued to this thing, what exactly is Project 2025, like in a nutshell?
It's essentially a massive policy document. It's like 900 pages, so it's really like a blueprint for the next conservative presidency. And it was put together by the Heritage Foundation. And they had input from over 100 other conservative organizations. They're really aiming to sort of reshape America, according to their vision.
And what exactly does that vision look like? Is it all tax cuts and deregulation, or is there more to it?
Well, the Telegraph podcast actually summarized the project's kind of four main pillars.
Okay.
So first, they want to restore the family, like the traditional family, as the bedrock of American society. Second, they want to dismantle what they call the administrative state, which we can unpack later.
A little ominous.
Yeah, a bit. Third, they want to strengthen national sovereignty and border control.
Right.
And finally, they want to ensure what they call God-given individual rights to live freely.
It's a pretty sweeping agenda.
It is.
And it's obviously stirring up a lot of controversy. Even some conservatives are finding parts of it pretty extreme. Which leads us to, well, Donald Trump and Project 2025.
Yeah.
He's publicly distanced himself from it, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has.
Even called some of the ideas ridiculous and abysmal.
Yeah.
Even claimed during the campaign that he didn't know anything about it.
Right.
But, and here's where it gets interesting, the LA Times piece really digs into this. They point out that Trump has appointed several key figures who actually have deep ties to Project 2025 to really influential positions in his administration.
Yeah, like positions of power.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So who are these people and what makes their connection to Project 2025 so significant?
Well, let's start with Russell Vought.
Okay.
So he's heading the Office of Management and Budget, and he actually wrote a whole chapter in Project 2025 playbook. And he's a big advocate for shrinking the federal government. Then you've got Tom Homan. He's called the border czar.
Right.
And he actually contributed to Project 2025 as well. And he really pushes for a tougher approach to immigration enforcement.
Of course, can't forget Stephen Miller, Trump's, right-hand man when it comes to policy.
Yeah.
Known for his very strong stance on immigration.
Right.
He also has connections to Project 2025.
He does. And even Brendan Carr over at the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, he's sort of echoing Trump's accusations of media bias, which is something that's a big part of Project 2025. So the LA Times piece really connects the dots between these individuals and like specific chapters in Project 2025. So it really suggests there was a strategy there.
So was Trump just blowing smoke when he dismissed Project 2025? Was it all just some campaign tactic?
Well, the LA Times seems to think so. But on the other hand, the Heritage Foundation president, they interviewed him on the Telegraph podcast, and he says that Trump was right to distance himself from it.
Okay.
He says that the left is misrepresenting what they're trying to do and that actually Trump's agenda and Project 2025's goals, there's actually a lot of overlap.
So it's a really complex relationship for sure. So we've got this potentially radical roadmap for America, championed by a president who, might be playing both sides. But the question that you, our listener, are really grappling with, I think, is how could this actually impact the lives of everyday people?
Yeah, that's the big one. And that's where these sources really get interesting. They go into specific areas where Project 2025's ideas could really have a ripple effect through society, affecting regular Americans.
So let's start with education. I know from your notes that Project 2025 proposes some pretty radical changes there.
It does,
Yeah.
yeah. The LA Times goes into detail about this proposal to completely get rid of the Department of Education. So think about your local schools, right? Their proposed changes could really shift how schools are funded and how much control the federal government has over them. It's got a lot of folks worried about the quality of education, especially in places that are already struggling to get by.
And then there's immigration. It's a hot-button issue. Project 2025 pushes for a much tougher approach. They even advocate for mass deportations.
Yeah, the LA Times article really highlights the possibility of labor shortages as a major concern. If they start deporting a lot of undocumented immigrants, businesses might struggle to find workers, certain industries could be hit hard, and of course then there's the human cost. Families being torn apart, that's a huge concern.
They also touch on environmental policies.
Mm.
And from what I've gathered, it's not exactly a top priority for Project 2025.
Not at all.
Yeah.
They actually want to dismantle agencies like NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the National Weather Service. So you think about what that could mean for environmental protection, our ability to prepare for and respond to, natural disasters, things like hurricanes and wildfires.
It's a little unsettling to think about.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole realm of social issues,
Mhm.
which, well, let's be honest, it's going to be contentious.
It is. They're advocating for stricter abortion laws, measures that could have a big impact on LGBTQ rights, and they're even talking about collecting data on women who seek abortions. It raises a lot of questions about personal freedom, individual rights, and how all this aligns with the values of a modern, diverse society.
So it seems pretty clear that this goes way beyond just political maneuvering in Washington.
It does.
We're talking about potential changes that could ripple through every corner of American life, from our kids' classrooms to the air we breathe.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this deep dive so important. It's about understanding how abstract political ideas can turn into real changes that impact everyday people in profound ways.
Okay, so we've established that Project 2025 is this really bold, maybe even radical vision for America, and it could have some pretty far-reaching consequences. But there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to unpack.
Yeah.
This concept of the administrative state. Now, this is where it gets a little more complex, but bear with us. It's super important to grasp if you really want to understand how Project 2025 could affect your life.
Yeah, it's less exciting than, say, Trump's diet, but it might have a bigger impact on your daily life.
Definitely more important than a Big Mac.
For sure. It's easy to think of the administrative state as just like another bit of political jargon. But when you really look at it, it has a pretty big impact on everyday life.
I'll admit it doesn't sound very exciting,
No, not really.
but I'm sensing there's more to it than meets the eye.
Oh, absolutely. Think of it this way. You might not see it every day, but the administrative state is working in the background, making sure your food is safe to eat. The medicines you take actually work,
Right.
and that, your workplace isn't going to collapse around you.
Okay, I see what you mean. So it's like this network of agencies that put the laws into practice, hold people accountable.
Exactly. It's the nuts and bolts of government, the stuff that keeps things running smoothly, even if we don't really think about it much.
So Project 2025 wants to, dismantle all of that. Sounds a little risky to me.
Well, how far they want to go is up for debate, but they definitely want to shrink it. Big time. They say it's bloated, inefficient, too much government overreach.
But the YouTube analysis that you sent, they don't really agree with that.
No, they don't.
They're saying that getting rid of these agencies would actually cause more problems.
Yeah, and they make a good point. They say the administrative state, for all its faults, provides essential services that people really rely on. Remember those Social Security checks we talked about?
Yeah.
They need a functioning administrative system to reach millions of Americans.
It's not just Social Security either.
Yeah.
What about food safety inspections, environmental regulations, workplace safety?
All that stuff depends on these agencies. The YouTube analysis says that conservatives like to criticize them for being bureaucratic, but they kind of overlook the fact that they protect our health, keep us safe, and look after the environment.
So getting rid of them might not lead to more freedom and efficiency, like the Project 2025 people say.
Right.
It could make us all more vulnerable in the long run.
It's a bit like, I don't know, cutting the brake lines in your car because you think they're slowing you down.
Ooh, that's a good analogy. And it brings us back to that big question. How does all this impact everyday people? Imagine fewer regulations on food safety, weaker environmental protections,
Yeah.
less oversight in workplaces. It could be a real mess.
It's pretty unsettling when you think about it.
It is.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary to think that something as fundamental as the administrative state could be, up for grabs.
Yeah, it really underscores how important it is to understand what Project 2025 is really all about, what the potential consequences could be. It's not just some abstract political theory. It's about the systems that make our society work, the stuff that protects us.
It makes me think twice about that burger I had for lunch.
Right.
But seriously, this is big stuff.
It is.
Okay, so we've tackled the serious stuff: education, immigration, the environment, this whole administrative state thing.
Right.
But now I have to ask about this unusual way of analyzing Project 2025 that I saw in your notes. This Trump dinner thing.
Oh, yeah. Now, this is where things get a little unconventional.
Really?
The Telegraph podcast, they decided to, well, explore Project 2025 while eating a meal based on Trump's diet.
Wait, are you serious? What does that even have to do with policy analysis?
I know, I thought it was a little strange at first, too. But they use it to make some interesting points. So, picture this. Big Macs, Filet-O-Fish, Diet Coke, even chocolate milkshakes. All the stuff Trump supposedly loves.
I could feel my arteries clogging just listening to you.
Right. But here's the thing. While they're chowing down on this, shall we say, interesting meal, they're going through the proposals in Project 2025. And they even brought in a nutritionist to talk about the health risks of eating like Trump.
Okay, now I see what they're doing. It's a metaphor, right?
Yeah.
This kind of over-the-top, maybe even unhealthy meal is representing the potentially risky side of Project 2025.
Exactly. It's like they're saying, hey, if you're worried about what the president eats, maybe you should also be worried about the policies he might put in place.
Clever. So they're highlighting the potential downsides of Project 2025, but are they also acknowledging, the arguments in its favor?
They are. And I think it's important for us to do the same, even if we don't agree with everything. To have a productive conversation, you need to understand both sides.
For sure. So what are some of those arguments in favor of Project 2025?
Well, one of the main ones is that it's a return to traditional values, a rejection of what they see as the excesses of, the modern liberal agenda. They think things have gone too far with social progressivism, government regulations, all that.
They think America's gone off track and Project 2025 is the way to get back on course.
Exactly. They believe in strong government, traditional values, and less government intervention in the economy. They think that'll lead to, more economic growth.
Less regulation, lower taxes,
Yeah.
the classic conservative playbook. It's interesting to hear their reasoning, though, even if I don't necessarily agree with it.
It is. It helps us understand where they're coming from. And that's why it's so important to think critically about all of this. Look at the evidence, form your own opinions. At the end of the day, it's up to each of us to decide what kind of future we want for this country.
And that future is going to be shaped by the choices we make today, the policies we support, the leaders we elect.
Exactly. That's why I think this deep dive into Project 2025 has been so valuable. It's not just about understanding some document. It's about understanding what could happen, what the potential impact of our choices as a society could be.
It's about recognizing that these aren't just abstract ideas. They can really change people's lives.
Absolutely. And as we've seen, Project 2025 could affect everything. Our schools, our jobs, our environment, even our personal freedoms. It's a lot to take in, but it's important stuff for anyone who wants to be an informed and engaged citizen.
Definitely food for thought. So where do we go from here? We've explored Project 2025, looked at its possible impact, heard all the different viewpoints. But what does this all mean for you, the listener?
Well, hopefully this whole deep dive has given you a better understanding of this blueprint for America's future. We've shown how it could affect your life, from your kids' education to the environment, from your job to your personal freedoms.
We've gone through the arguments for and against it, and hopefully we've helped you think critically about what could happen if it actually becomes reality.
And while we haven't given you all the answers, because honestly there are no easy answers, we hope we've given you the tools to have these important conversations.
With more knowledge, more understanding, and maybe even a little more confidence.
Because ultimately, the future isn't something that just happens to us. We create it through our choices, our actions, and the way we engage with the world.
So as you navigate the ups and downs of politics, remember that your voice matters. Stay informed. Keep asking questions.
Yeah, and keep sending us those sources.
Absolutely. We'll be here to help you dive into whatever you throw our way, whether it's fascinating, confusing, or just plain thought-provoking.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep building the future you want to see.
Wow, it feels like we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have, from dissecting policy proposals to pondering the fate of these government agencies.
Right.
And even taking a detour through Trump's, let's just say, interesting dietary choices. It has been quite the journey. But I think what's really fascinating is how all of these things connect back to this fundamental question. What kind of future do we want? for ourselves and for the Guanche.
It's like we've been holding up a mirror to American society.
Yeah.
And Project 2025, with all its complexities, with all its controversies, is reflecting back some pretty stark realities.
Exactly. And one of those realities is this deep sense of, like, dissatisfaction that a lot of Americans feel, with the way things are. The YouTube analysis that we talked about, it actually points to that as a big reason why Trump won.
Yeah.
They're saying people feel like the system isn't working, their voices aren't being heard, like their values are being, I don't know, ignored, maybe even ridiculed by, like, the elites.
So Project 2025 is kind of tapping into that, right? It's offering this vision of going back to a time when things felt simpler.
It seems like it. And for some people, it's not even about the specific policies. It's more about, like, identity,
Yeah.
Belonging, feeling like they're part of something, like their values matter.
It's about taking back control in a world that feels increasingly, I don't know, out of control. And that's why this is so much more than just a political debate. It's tapping into something much deeper.
Absolutely. It's emotional. It's about people's core beliefs and anxieties.
So where do we go from here? I mean, we've explored Project 2025. We've talked about its potential impact. We've acknowledged that there are all these different viewpoints. But what does it all mean for you, our listener, who, brought all this to us in the first place?
Well, I hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of this plan, this blueprint for America's future.
Yeah.
We've highlighted how it could actually impact different parts of your life, from your kids' education to the environment, your job, your personal freedoms. We've looked at the arguments for it, the arguments against it. We've really encouraged you to think critically about what could happen.
Yeah. And while we haven't given you all the answers, because honestly, who has all the answers? I hope we've given you the tools to be part of this conversation, to be informed, to think for yourself.
Yeah, to have those tough conversations, but with, more knowledge and maybe even a little more confidence.
Because at the end of the day, the future is not something that just happens to us. It's something we create through the choices we make, the actions we take, the way we engage with the world.
So as you're trying to make sense of all this, this crazy world of politics, remember that your voice matters. Stay informed. Stay curious. Keep asking those questions.
And keep those sources coming. We'll be here to help you dive deep, no matter what you throw our way.
That's right. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep building the future you want to see.
See you next time.